Welcome to the Asking Why podcast. I'm your host, Clint Davis. I'm a marriage and family therapist and licensed professional counselor trained in trauma and addiction. The Asking Why podcast is for anyone on a journey of healing and restoration. If you are searching for answers to life's questions and want to learn more about root causes from a psychological and theological mix, this show is for you. In this podcast, myself and a co-host from Clint Davis Counseling and Integrative Wellness will interview guests on a wide range of topics in order to get down to the heart of the problems facing our world and understand why things happen and how to change the world and ourselves for the better. Want to learn more tips and tricks to living a healthy lifestyle? Visit us at Clint Davis Counseling and Integrative Wellness on Facebook and Instagram. If you want to meet our staff or book a speaker, go to clintdaviscounseling.com. Thanks for listening and be sure to subscribe today. All right. Welcome, guys. Episode, let's see, where we on 8. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yay, that's exciting.
This is a privilege.
Thanks.
This is fun.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you guys. So introduce yourselves, kind of tell me who y'all are and what you do.
Ladies first?
Oh, me first. Okay. My name is Becca. I am a young adult in Shreveport, Bossier, and I'm a speech therapist. And so I work at LSU med school, and I see specifically children through the Children's Center with autism. And so I work with them doing feeding therapy, speech therapy, things like that. And then also I do early steps, which is early intervention. And so I go into homes and work with the parents on children who are speech delayed or feeding issues and things like that. And so that's what I do for a living. And then with this guy over here, Drew, I lead a ministry called YALA, Young Adults Louisiana, through Broadmoor Baptist. And so that is a fun thing to do as well. So
Awesome. And how old are you?
I am 25.
Okay, so a young adult.
Yeah.
There you
All right, Drew?
Younger than y'all, so.
Yeah, for sure, younger than us.
go. My name is Drew Burnham, and I am also a young adult. And I like to claim being a young adult.
I think you can claim it for a few
Yeah, you're
more
still
years.
making the cut.
For a few more years. Okay. And I'm an attorney here in town. I work at a firm called Cook Yancey King Galloway, doing civil litigation stuff. So about half of that's probably oil and gas related. It's a lot of what Shreveport Bossier economy is based on, and I love doing oil and gas work, but I also pretty much do everything that's not family law and not criminal law. There's a lot of unhappy attorneys out there you hear about, but I absolutely love my job. And but I also love what Becca and I get to do on Monday nights is Young Adults Louisiana, YALA. And so I know we're going to be talking more about that later, but we also both work in a young adult small group at church. We both have worked with high school students for several years.
Oh, yeah.
So we both love doing that, just investing in people and helping people find community and find a place where they can grow.
Yeah, thank y'all both for coming on. I mean, I think one of the main goals of this podcast is to talk about young adult issues, moving from kind of teenage years to adulthood, and what that's been like personally for you guys, but what that's like from a ministry perspective, what you're seeing in the friends and the community. I think so many times, and it was my experience, is that, that age is completely kind of forgotten when it comes to books and ideas and resources.
Or literally anything. Like, no one talks about it. And it's this whole new life season of like, hey, I'm not in school anymore. What is my purpose? Like, I'm trying to figure this out. So, yeah.
I think we can get into kind of what YALA is. So, because I think that comes out of, I know 318 Live was a big thing in Shreveport.
Right.
There's a couple other ones that are going on. But it was kind of like, hey, how do we fill this gap for young adults? So whoever wants to start can tell me about that.
Yeah, I think the idea for YALA came out of a place where young adults are super, not an unreached people group, because I think they know the gospel, but a people group that's forgotten about in church a lot because they're not parents, and some of them aren't married, and churches spend a lot of time investing in married couples and a lot of time investing in parents, and then a whole lot of time investing in you from when you're in elementary school to high school. They have all this programming and all of these people who are investing in you, and then you go to college and you get out of college and you try to learn the workforce life, and there's kind of nothing there. And so we saw this huge need for young adults to be able to belong and have community, and have worship together and be together and learn about topics that are super relevant to us, not just from Sunday morning preaching, but we really strive to do relevant topics and things like that. And so it's something we've prayed about for a really long time and launched last year. I think in September of last year. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, probably into August.
Into August, September. Oh, August 26th. It was my brother's birthday. That's
nice.
Funny. And so, yeah.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, JT, shout out. No. And so we launched it last year, and then COVID happened and blew it all up. And so we're in the middle of figuring out relaunching and things like that. But
yeah, we kind of try to say it's where every young adult belongs, because it's not just targeted towards a churched crowd or just people who go to Broadmoor. We want everybody to feel like this is a place where they can be known, find community with other young adults, learn and grow, but also that it's a safe place to ask tough questions, that it's a place where they can be authentic, and sometimes church is not like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes church can be a place where it's actually probably one of the more difficult places to ask tough questions about what I believe or what I'm supposed to be doing with my life, or just have doubts in general. But we want Yala to be a place where we can just all be vulnerable and all be known and all know that we're loved and belong as part of this community. So we've been very blessed to see a great response to Yala and to have great speakers like you and starting. You helped us out back in the spring before COVID shut us down, but also starting off our series this October. So
yeah, I'm excited about being there. And who else is on kind of the leadership team, or who kind of started it?
Tyler Hennessy was kind of the driving force starting Yala. He's head of our Doxa worship at Broadmoor Baptist. Okay. But there's been a lot of team members over the years. Dylan Van Eaton is probably one of the key people not here. He drives our social media and
he is incredibly talented.
He's so talented. Yeah,
we could not do anything without him. But
Justin Rogers leads our music now. Cameron Theodos, when he was here, he's now moving on to another opportunity, but he helped out Yala a lot. He and Courtney Theodos. What are some other drivers? Jared Osborne has been a great encourager, great idea person for starting a community. Who else would you?
Dylan Brunson and Kevin Bruner lead our hospitality team, so our greeting and helping people belong type of team. Yeah. They're great.
But if you go in our leadership group, there's probably about 70 people on there. So we can't go through everybody. But
no, for sure.
There's so many.
So just shout out to all of those guys.
Shout out to all of them.
And ladies and
honestly, we named some of the people who are on staff, but right now Yala is pretty much exclusively run by volunteers. It's not people who are paid to be there. It's people who want to be there, who really identify with this community, have grown already in this community, and just want to see it continue to blossom.
That's awesome. So when is it?
Monday nights.
7:00.
Every Monday.
Okay. Awesome. Yep. That's at Broadmoor Baptist.
Broadmoor Baptist,
right.
Exactly.
So there's worship, hang out, and then food afterwards.
Another thing I love, sorry about it, you did mention it's at Broadmoor Baptist. It is at Broadmoor Baptist. Broadmoor funds it, provides a location for it. But when you start breaking down who's coming, it's a lot of people that don't go to Broadmoor.
Oh, for sure. Even Monday, whenever I talked, and last year, there's a lot of people who don't go to Broadmoor, go to other churches, or don't go to church at all.
Right.
And that's kind of their Monday night church thing. So.
And we want it to be like that. That
was our vision.
Yes.
Yeah, was that it would be a whole bunch of young adults, not divided by churches or
denominations.
That's the word I was thinking. Yeah. Denominations, but really just want to know Jesus better and want to know more young adults in the community. So it's cool that vision has kind of come to life, and that we have people leading music from different churches, speakers from all over the area. Yeah,
it's awesome.
And sorry, another thing that just popped in my head, 7:00 is when the actual service starts. But we start hanging out at 6:30 before that. So come play games with us, grab a snack or a drink or whatever we have out there, and just build community, talking with other young adults, meeting them beforehand. So if you're a young adult listening to this podcast, show up early, 6:30. We're on the south side of the Broadmoor Baptist campus, and come hang out with us before we get started at 7.
Yeah, we have fun.
That's awesome. So what are some things, I guess, to get into kind of the COVID stuff? What are some ways that personally you guys have been impacted this year as young adults by COVID, and what do you kind of see in your own personal experiences, but also in like the lives of other people?
Yeah, COVID hit me pretty hard early on. I'm an extrovert, and I just really, I think it actually hit my introverted friends probably a little bit it's slower to hit them.
Yeah.
But it hit everybody. I'm not saying just it only hit extroverts, but man, immediately when COVID started shutting down different community of stuff, things that I'm a part of, it really had me down. Just kind of like, where am I investing? How can I invest in people? Who's investing in me now that I'm isolated and stuck at my house? I can't even go to work. I'm working from home, so I can't even interact with people that I usually do on a work basis. I'm paid to interact with. So it was a kind of a strike at my identity of helping people or wanting to invest in people. It kind of struck at, okay, what, that part of me is gone. Who am I now? Who can I be in isolation?
Right.
And
especially, right, not married, not having kids.
Right.
You know, you're not, as a young adult, if you're not married, you don't have kids, you're not like in a house with other people that you can just play in the backyard. Like for me, I get to play with my kids and see my wife, and there is some built-in community.
Right.
Even though a lot of people would say that drives me crazy now that I'm having to do this every day.
But at least you had people.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Drew had roommates.
I had roommates.
I don't have roommates, so.
I broke the rules a little bit with a few months down the line. My girlfriend and I started, interacting again, more than just on our phones on FaceTime. But no, it was hard to date during COVID.
I bet.
Good grief! I'm very thankful that survived COVID. But it's tough.
Yeah, I mean, talk about that a little bit. So you were dating somebody, COVID hit, and then you felt like we can't even go on dates, we can't see each other.
Yeah, so it kind of turned for several weeks. It was like we were FaceTiming each other every day, texting obviously, but
so not the same.
I would drop off dinner and flowers at her house, or we would try to meet in the front yard sometimes and social distance on different parts of the yard. It was so weird. People thought we were probably crazy, but they also probably understood it's COVID. We're trying to social distance.
Yeah.
She had parents that she was seeing all the time, and so she was careful about who she saw. I have parents who are kind of in that vulnerable range, or we identified early on as the people who are the most vulnerable, and so I was trying to be careful so I could take care of them, and so if they got sick, and so everybody was just so tiptoeing around each other. Dating wise, it was just very hard to connect emotionally when you're doing it on a screen. And so it was a tough time for our relationship, but thankfully the Lord brought us through. We both had the right goal in mind and knew this was a season, and just kind of bore it. But
that's awesome. What's her name?
Erin Carson.
Nice.
Shout out to her. She's a counselor too.
Yeah, awesome.
Counselor at Broadmoor Baptist.
Awesome.
That's cool.
What about for you?
For me, I would say, I think the first couple of weeks of COVID were kind of fun because I got a break from the busyness of life, and so I was able to kind of chill out and read books again and hang out at my house and not feel like I had to be somewhere all the time. And so at first it felt like a little bit of a break, and I was like, okay, this is kind of nice. But then it kept going and kept going and kept going. And so personally, I struggle with a lot of anxiety about the unknown and not being able to control things. And all of my normal coping mechanisms I couldn't do because of COVID. I couldn't distract myself by hanging out with other people or things like that because that was kind of taken away from me. And so I had to relearn to rely on the Lord for a lot of that because it felt like everything else was gone. Well,
it was.
It was gone, yeah. And 2 weeks before COVID started, I had put in my 2 weeks at my job to start a new job. And so I was supposed to start a new job on April 1st. And thankfully, I was able to start, but I was also working from home until June. And so just the transition of a new job and the transition of everything with COVID world being so different and everything getting canceled summer-wise and things like that. And Drew and I were both leading high schoolers at that time, and they were seniors. And so I was honestly looking forward to so many things with them, their graduation parties, their graduation sending them off to college well and things like that. And they were all sad that all of that was getting taken away. And so it's figuring out how to celebrate those things in a COVID world. And like he said, I was FaceTiming a lot of people, which was fun at the beginning because you're like, oh, I'm still connecting with people. But then at the end of the day, you're like, I don't really feel like I connected with anybody today because it was just all through screens. And then I think everyone said like Zoom weary or something like that because like I was so tired of Zooming. I was like, I'd rather just sit at my house by myself than see people through my computer. And so ended up getting a dog during COVID. So I got a COVID puppy and she is so much fun, even out of COVID. But yeah, it was a lot of anxiety for me. It was a lot of like, unknown job wise, unknown friend, like, and no one knew how long it was going to last. Like, it wasn't like, okay, just make it to May 1st and then everything will be back to normal because we don't even know when normal's coming or if it's coming, Yeah. So, yeah.
I did love about the COVID period that it seemed for a while that everyone was pulling together like on the same team. Like we're fighting this as a country, we're fighting this as a state, as a community.
Like a uniting factor of COVID.
Yeah. And now that seems to have broken down. But I did love that unifying, we're on the same team thing. And it did remind me, as you were talking about getting in the Word and finding different coping mechanism, there was a threat, and it happened for many of my young adult friends, that old coping mechanisms, pornography being a major one in the young adult community. I think it might have been in other communities as well. But coping mechanisms to deal with isolation or feeling unwanted or feeling unloved reared their ugly head like never before.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to when people are struggling with that, it was hard during COVID to try to help me, and because that was an old coping mechanism I had to fight too, is trying to help people through that in healthy ways when you're not there, when you're FaceTiming them or when you're on Zoom with them.
And so, when you're going through the same thing.
That's
what's unique about COVID, right? Is like as ministers, as counselors, as people who are used to, same thing with pornography in my life. Like, yeah, it's like you can know all the things, you can know all the coping skills, but when all that's removed and you're isolated and you're alone, and then you're all going through it the same, then you're like, well, you shouldn't do that. But like, I'm kind of struggling with that too. And so like, I don't really know what to do with this. And, whether it's eating or porn or, anger, whatever your thing is, right? I mean, it's not just that. I mean, there's a host of issues that people use to cope that were, like you said, rearing their heads and going, oh, well, I thought I had this. I had all these things in place. I mean, I work with people every week to say, okay, here's your 3 circle exercise. Here are the things you're going to do to make sure that you don't act out. Here's the middle circle, which helps you with slippery slope behavior. And here's your relapse. Well, the entire outward circle was just gutted. Go to the gym. At some point, go for a walk. Like, they shut the parks down. Like, you couldn't even go outside and go to the park. So it was just go to Bible study, meet with people, go to coffee, get outside with people. And all of those were taken. It's hard to expect people just to be able to maintain, all of their sobriety and whatever the coping mechanism. It's almost impossible, right? Yeah. I mean, we know nothing is impossible with God, but the reality is we're humans. And I think a lot of Christians struggle with that. Like, wait a second, I spent all this effort and all this work, and now that's all killed. And here I am kind of struggling with these old things, and I have so much shame, and now I'm alone.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So coping mechanisms that COVID forced me to find better coping mechanisms that don't involve community, because most of mine involved community and reaching out to people and
rightly so.
With people. And so reading books, I mean, you've probably heard people say that ad nauseum. I didn't read as many as most people, but I did spend some more time. But one of the major thing for me is actually quieting my mind and going outside and just spending time in nature. And so just I have really loved the part of my life that's blossomed since COVID of getting outside, of taking walks, working out, just going to a schoolyard like gym and doing pull-ups and working out there. And but also prayer. My prayer life has just really blossomed over COVID like never before. And that has been a huge benefit that's carried on as restrictions have loosened up. Just having that communion with God each and every day, morning, evening, throughout the day has just borne a lot of fruit.
That's awesome.
Borne a lot of fruit.
Yeah, that is cool. I think the hardest part of COVID, too, in my own life and in the life of young adults that I've talked to, is that your purpose was kind of stripped away, because a lot of people either lost their jobs, and, you know, in our generation, work is a big thing. It's where I spend the majority of my time. And so you have no job, or you're working from home, and so you're not, like, I was trying to do teletherapy with 2-year-olds. Not happening, you know what I mean? Like, completely not happening. And so that identity of work, that identity of being a friend, and planning events and things like that was all stripped away into where you were like, okay, like, what's my purpose of being here now? Because I can't go anywhere but my house, you know? And so it's just this, like, okay, Lord, like, clearly you've ordained this season for the whole world. And so what are you doing in it? Like, what am I supposed to be doing in it? What am I supposed to be learning in it? And so honestly, COVID was a huge growth chapter for me, just diving into some of those types of things. And so, I don't know.
That's good. One of the things I want to talk about in y'all's generation in general, like you mentioned, I think career, individualism, self-reliance, self-focus, you know, I think that's a big thing, you know, with 18 to 30-year-olds in America. And COVID really stripped everybody of that. You know, all the plans we had, all the preparations, the schooling, the, you know, the different things that you had to do, and then all of a sudden that's just canceled. You know, I mean, it was the same way for me, but like, I'm into my career, right? I've already gotten my license. I'm already doing my thing. So it stunk, but in a different way. I wasn't just starting out, and it felt like, you know, you guys really got the axe on a lot of the things that you were just getting motivated and spent all this energy and effort, you know, to do. So
Definitely.
Yeah. No, I think that it's just hard because you were like, okay, I've been preparing for this for so long. Like, for speech therapy, I had to go to college, and I had to get my master's degree and things like that. And I've been out a couple of years. And so, but just like starting a new job and being like, I want to do it well, but how do I do it well in this season where no one's there, and no one's at work anymore? And so, but I think in our culture, that career-driven like mentality is huge. And that's where we find so much of our identity as young adults, is in what we do. It's where we find our friendships. It's where we find people and things like that. So,
yeah. One of the things that I see in my office all the time is, you know, before COVID, so let's go back a little bit, because, you know, COVID has kind of taken our focus, and a lot of the issues that young adults deal with, we kind of go, oh, well, COVID did this, and so now we're dealing with this. But, you know, I was speaking all over the place last year and the year before, and one of the things that was already happening was a huge rise in anxiety, depression, suicide within young adults, especially late teens, early 20s. Is that something that you guys have experienced within the ministry, within your own lives?
I will say I struggle with anxiety, and it's something that as I've opened up about it and talked to my friends about it, I've figured out that they struggle with it too. And so it's something that, I think a lot of young adults are struggling with anxiety. I think a lot of young adults are struggling with depression because, and honestly, this sounds like such a cliche answer, but I think a lot of it has to do with social media. I think social media has created this culture of comparison. And so you're comparing your own life to people's lives who have been photoshopped, or 15-second snippets of other people's lives, and it causes a lot of comparison and a lot of like self-doubt and things like that, to where you start having more thoughts of anxiety and depression and things like that, and suicide as well. I mean, we've seen it in our ministry a little bit, but I think it's just people are holding themselves and holding other people up to such a high social media standard, that you just can't live up to it, and it's starting to affect our mental health. So,
yeah, I heard somebody say, like, you know, the problem with your generation is that you don't know you're in the matrix, right? And what I mean by that is, you know, there's what's called an age gap. So everybody's always, their parents have said like, oh, kids these days, or the kids have said, you don't understand us because you're old. And for most of history, like somewhat that's true, but your parents actually did understand, right? Like they understood what it was like to have friends, to call people, to date, to go out, to go to school. And so like I'm 37, so my dad and my grandfather's experience of high school is very similar to mine, right? We called people on the phone, we wrote letters, we engaged with them a specific way. But then all of a sudden, right, in 2007, 2010, when the cell phone entered and social media entered into the world, that's all you guys have known at your age, right? I mean, I don't know about you, Drew, at 30. When did you get social media for the first time?
So high school.
Right.
So yeah, high school.
And so Becca, I mean,
I was
what?
8th grade.
Right. So your introduction from puberty into communicating and socializing was immediately met with social media. Facebook, I'm sure, was original.
Oh, wow.
Right, Instagram,
Yeah.
Snapchat, all these things. Now we got TikTok, we got a million other things. I'm sure I'm out to date even in the last like 2 months from what people are using, WhatsApp. But the reality is that that's never been that way in human history. So now when kids are saying like you don't understand, like the adults really don't understand because they're what we call analog to digital converts. I talked about this Monday a little bit. I remember writing, getting a map out in the car and going, y'all have never experienced that, right? That's not been a thing. And you're not used to being in a social setting where everyone doesn't know everything about you. It's like I find myself, I got off social media in January I'm on it, but for a business page, but posting anything personal, because I found myself being like, I'd see a friend and they'd be like, oh, I heard so-and-so, I saw you did this, this, and this. And it's like, well, what are we going to talk about now? Because now you know everything.
Mm-hmm.
But you've, like, all of your friends have always known everything.
But not only do all of your friends know everything, everybody knows everything.
Yeah.
And so it's like not that you're comparing yourself to the 200 people at your high school or the 20 people at your job, but you're comparing like to the world. Like they're like, never have we known this much information about other people without actually knowing them.
Right. And it's not real.
And it's not real.
It's a curated version
Yeah.
of what they're going through. And so, and while our generation very much values authenticity and vulnerability, even the vulnerability that we see on media is a curated version of what people want you to see of what is vulnerable. And so it's and if you don't have that interpersonal relationship with someone where you can face to face see what's going on and open up to someone, if you don't have that, you're gonna be very hesitant to ever open up to someone on social media, ever open up to someone, period. So I think one of the reasons why we're having so much anxiety and so much depression is that people just feel like they're bottled up, or they can't be who they really are, or be vulnerable with people because of this pressure to be best, or to this pressure to keep what people see of you
facade.
the mask up, to use a 2020 thing, the mask. I think that's one of the things, just briefly touching back on Yala, plug it back in.
Sure.
Is that what we don't want? We want people to be able to break down the mask. We want people to be able to ask vulnerable, deep questions, to be able to have doubts, to be able to know that healing is possible. That's why it's so important that we started off this series in October, started Yala back with mental health that you're focusing on, Clint. It's because, yes, anxiety and depression are huge issues for our community, and they're only getting worse. Because even though we are so connected, we have never, I don't think, ever been so isolated.
Because the question goes like, are you connected though? Right, because we're connected through opportunity, but are we connected emotionally? And I think that's what you mentioned is, of course, the goal of the podcast is saying, asking why. And as you're talking, like we're talking about it, but we're still missing why that is, right? We're still not getting to the root of why is it that this age can't talk to one another, can't sit down. And I think the answer, in my opinion, is that you haven't learned to. right? You've had a pacifier with social media allowing you to communicate and connect and think that you're connecting and communicating, when in reality, like you said, it's easier to say, hey, here's a picture of me sad, and I'm going to write a little blurb about my anxiety and my depression. I'm going to be vulnerable about this, and this is powerful. And I'm not hating on people who do that. But what's harder is to sit down with somebody at dinner
and say, hey, I've really been struggling this week.
Yeah.
Like, this has not been a good week. Like, my anxiety is high. I've had panic attacks. Like, I need you to pray with me, or something like that, to where it's like, all right, you actually have to tell it in person, because you have to deal with the other person's reaction in person.
Yes.
And you can't be like, I'm going to post this and I'm going to put my phone away and not care what anybody thinks. Like, that's not our human nature. Like, we care what people think. And so whenever you're having to do it face to face, I get to read every cue and every facial expression you have as I tell you what I need to tell you, you know? And that's hard. Like,
and
that's hard.
and like never before, like I said, you weren't trained to, because your parents, you know, didn't transition with you into this world, right? They're still analog. They know how to talk face to face. I mean, they're not very good at it, and they're all traumatized too, and we can get into that whole thing. I mean, I think that's part of the problem, right? Is that the church culture in the world is a vast history in the last 50, 60 years of adults being very traumatized, never getting therapy, never engaging with Jesus in a way that changes their hearts and their minds, and then they parent. Right. And that's always been the case for 1,000, 3,000 years. But then that epigenetics is what we, you know, the study of how things get passed down, is it happened. And then you guys entered into social media tech world, and no one ever recovered. It was not like everybody recovered and then was like, okay, now we're going to do social media.
Like, now let's take on this challenge.
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
no, we're not ready.
No, and we weren't.
No.
And now we're only 10 years in, really 7 to 10 years in. And everybody's starting to scramble, and then Social Dilemma and these movies come out because people are realizing, like, we are in a downward, you know, spiral. But you guys are eighth grade, so that was how long ago?
Oh gosh, you're gonna make me sound old now. I have no idea. 12 years ago.
Right. So you've been 12 years into something that we're now realizing is super toxic, and not real, and manipulative. And geared to literally lie to you and change your whole perception of the world. And we're going, I wonder why people have anxiety and depression and want to off themselves, right? I heard somebody say the other day, you know, and I feel the same way as a counselor. Like, when people come in, they're like, I'm struggling with anxiety. Like, I'm not surprised, right? I'm not like, oh, that's a mystery to me why you're struggling with anxiety and depression, or you're suicidal. What's a mystery to me is how everybody isn't struggling with all of it. Right? Like, how we can live in a world that we know we're being killed essentially by the mental health issues of today, and that anybody can hurt us, and that anybody can betray us, and that anybody can run us over with a car, and that we can walk around without anxiety and depression. Like, that's what's a mystery to me. And I think the gospel kind of answers that peace that surpasses all understanding, that the world doesn't understand, that it's not that you're going to get to a place where everything's perfect and there's harmony and you're never going to have anxiety or depression. It's that while you're going through it, you can still have peace of mind.
And that was a big thing for me going through counseling with anxiety and things like that. Is it's not, I don't know, I think some people think like Jesus is this magic pill that's going to take away my anxiety, and I have prayed that he takes away my anxiety so many times, and I still wake up and struggle with it. Like, it is still a daily battle for me. And so it's like, it's not this like magic cure-all, I pray about it and it goes away. It's a like battle in my mind where I have to quote scripture and I have to bring it to the Lord and pray moment by moment that he gives me the peace and the joy that I need to make it through the day. But it's not like, oh, just give it to Jesus and it'll be fine. Like, I do give it to Jesus and I still struggle with it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so, and learning like, yes, there is a peace that surpasses all understanding, but that it is a moment by moment, day by day battle. It's not, oh, I fought it, I'm good. Like, I conquered that one back in college. No, you know.
No, absolutely, because you would have to change the entire worldview and paradigm of how you live. If the issue to your anxiety and my anxiety and everybody's anxiety that has it, at this point we need to realize, like, if you don't have it, you're the unique unicorn in the world, right? I mean, I think there's a lot of shame around mental health issues, or has been for a long time. And I don't want to normalize it and just say, well, it's okay for you to be anxious or it's okay for you to be depressed. Like, no, you need to be working on it. Yeah, you're not isolated. And that's not because you're uniquely broken. Mm-hmm. That's because there is a world that we're in that is systemically set up to cause fear and anxiousness and shame, because everything is marketing to you, telling you you're not enough, that you need more, that you have to have this. I mean, even
this, then you'll be enough, or then you'll be happy.
Yeah. So you're just chasing that carrot, out in front of you, and you can get all the carrots in the world, but then you need another carrot. Mm-hmm. And I think even more so for your generation, education and this idea of like, you need to get a bachelor's, and now like a bachelor's is like you can't even do anything with that. Yeah,
it's a high school degree.
Yeah,
now.
You have to have
You have
to get something else.
Yeah, like a master's is what you basically have to have. And I wonder in the next decade what that's going to look like, because a bachelor's degree is a dime a dozen. If you're all going for the same jobs and competing for the same careers, it's like, oh no, that's not enough. And now college costs so much money.
Talk about anxiety. Yeah, I think that's one of the contributing factors is that a lot of young adults are having to delay starting a family, delay getting married, delay even having a job because of that educational factor. Mm-hmm. But then you pile on the cost, the extremely high cost that you can also delay by just accumulating debt. Of getting all those things. That's also an anxiety producing reality that young adults are having to deal with, is the delay, looking around you and seeing a lot of people starting families, a lot of people starting relationships, and you're delaying it. And then,
which again, I will add, is because you're on social media looking at it.
Yes.
So that I just want to link the problem for people, because that's part of the issue, is like, if you didn't have social media at all, would it be so delayed? Would you be in such a crisis, right? Would you be parallel? Like, yes, you might feel behind, but the reality is like, it's like when you get pregnant, you look around and everybody's pregnant. When you buy a truck, everybody has that truck. When you get your hair done, everybody dyed their hair blonde, whatever, It's the same thing with this. Like, so I'm not saying there's not a problem, but I'm saying the problem gets hyper focused and your anxiety goes up because you're not looking at your 2 or 3 friends who are struggling with this. You're looking at 10,000 people. Like, people in Saudi Arabia are on Instagram posting about how they're in debt. It's like, does that make sense? So,
no, definitely. No. Yeah, and that's really what I was trying to link it back to, is that we have this comparison problem, and comparison is so accessible. We're not just comparing to our neighbors and what car they drive into their driveway. We're comparing all of the thousands of friends that we've accumulated over the years and their status in life, or what they've achieved, and then suddenly we're not enough, or we're not doing well enough because somebody else has something that we want.
But I think you're speaking directly to the debt part, because that is unique to you guys as young adults. Mm-hmm. Is that because you have to get extra degrees and extra things, you're spending so much time and energy and money, but then it's not paying off in the way that you thought it was going to.
Right.
Yeah.
People get a history degree and they spend $60,000 and then they're,
at an entry-level job that's never gonna ever pay that $60,000 back.
Right.
Yeah, and we're not good at handling money.
No. Nobody taught you to.
Yeah, we've never, like, we're handling tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, or maybe just having an income for the first time too. Like, how do I budget? How do I do all those things? That's a stressor. These are really important decisions that we don't feel equipped for, ready for, and that's also anxiety producing. I'm not saying other generations haven't dealt with money issues. I think that's probably been a stressor since humanity existed. Is how am I going to put food on the table the next time? But the pressure of it, because of the amount of debt, the amount of money we're dealing with, is I think new. But also something that's new is instant gratification has never been more available to us. We have Amazon that will just pop it to your door the next day now.
Yeah, I'm mad when it's like 2 days. I'm like, what? I ordered this Kylo Ren mask for my son. It's not here yet. It's been 3 days. Why? He's ready to play with it.
Well, excuse me.
Frankly, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, for sure.
But no, we have instant gratification that we can watch any movie we want to on our phone, or we can pull up the game on our phone. We can do anything we want almost instantaneously now, or more things instantaneously than we ever have before. And we want that same thing for our life. We want that house we want that our friend just got with the great decor. We want that now. We don't want to have to save up for that.
No.
And so there's just instant gratification is also something we've got to learn to be patient.
Yep. Well, I think that's one call that Christ, tells us. I mean, all the way to heaven is deferring our reward. I think sometimes we think, I'm going to work really hard. I'm going to do therapy. I'm going to do all these things. And the goal is that I arrive, right? That somehow if I finally do enough work, if I finally make money, if I finally get this education, if I finally meet this girl, if I finally meet this guy, I'm going to arrive at this place where I can finally relax.
Then I can have everything I want.
Yes. And that's heaven.
Yeah, it's not going to be here.
Yeah, at all, ever. So we have to figure out, how as young adults do we learn that lesson? Like, how do we realize that if that's the truth, then that's not the goal, right? That the journey, the process is the goal, that experiencing the kingdom periodically, right, but less often, and deferring our rewards is really the goal. And I think for your generation of young adults, there's going to have to be a significant shift because you started out in a deficit in a way that nobody else has. Does that make sense? And I know that this, sounds crazy to people, but like I said Monday, I really do think that if you're 18 and you got social media, or you were 12 and you got social media, and you're 30 now, or you're 25 now, you've never not had it. And it is shaping your neurology. It's setting you up for dopamine and addiction. It's setting you up to not be able to physically defer your reward. And if you don't take a break from it and detox, you don't know yourself. You don't know your friends, and you'll never be able to compete against the dopamine drip that is your phone, that is social media. And so I'm not saying social media is evil. I think it's amazing. There's a lot of good things about it. But as it exists, it's way more toxic than it is beneficial. And so I just challenge people that are listening, that are out there, get off all of it. For 6 months, make a plan, get off of it. And the plan is, hey, friends, can 3 or 4 of you do this together with me? Right, and let's try this together, and let's meet for coffee, and let's get back to some things that maybe these old fogies who are 37, that they used to do. Because that's the thing, like, there are a lot of things that old people say or older people say that's ridiculous, and it's just like, well, that's just different. But this is actually a reality, and we know that statistically the suicide rates increased 200%. We know that parallels with being on social media. We know that people are literally dying, right, and their mental and emotional health is in the toilet. But yet we will not stop doing it, which is kind of that's literally the definition of addiction is when you're doing something over and over again, expecting a different result. Like, that's the definition of insanity. You're doing it over and over again, despite the consequences. You continue to use it, even though it's not giving you any positive outcome. So the question is, right, why is that? Why won't we do it?
Well, I feel like you just said get some friends to do it with you. I feel like that's one of the obstacles is we feel like we're going to lose our friend. We're going to disconnect from our friends. Like, that's how we connect with our friends so much and keep track of them is not by a phone call. It's not by meeting up for lunch or coffee. It's by social media, and we're afraid of losing that.
Yeah, I will say that I've had a friend who got off of it probably a year and a half ago and has not gotten back on. And that is one of the things she'll say is that, like, I don't know what's going on in my friends' lives because they won't tell me. And so she's like, I saw somebody the other day and she was like, did you see that I was pregnant? And she was like, nope, had no idea. Like, can you just tell me? And so I think that one of the reasons we won't get off is we fear not having the information. And not being able to connect with people.
For sure. So again, the real question is
it actually connection?
Yes, because what we're saying is it's not.
Yeah.
And so I'm talking about the church now. Like, I understand the secular worldview, but as far as us as young adults and Christians who are trying to move into parenting, who are going to move into raising another generation of people who are, we believe hope in the world, who are light in the darkness. If we don't get this together, then we're saying, I'm going to lose these things, but I'm losing things that I don't actually have. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's your brain playing tricks on you.
Yes.
It is.
So again, it takes community. Like, we've got to have a conversation with each other and say, we're not going to get off forever. Like, we don't think the world's going to work with no social media. Like, that's going to be a thing. And we want to be able to engage in the world. We want to be able to be a part of that world. But 3 months, 6 months, I say 6 months because it resets your, 3 months, 90 days especially will reset your brain. So let's downplay it a little bit. Let's say 90 days. Okay.
Well, I could do 90 days. 6 months sounds a lot.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
90 days is enough to reset your neurology, right? When I work with sex addicts, or if I work with drug addicts, like, your main goal is, no acting out for 90 days to reset your neurology. So as a church, can we, in individual groups, in discipleship groups, try it, right? And it's so scary. I get it. But the reality is the alternative is death. Death emotionally, death spiritually, because you're just putting it off, right? Because when you try to get married and your spouse is on their phone every night while you're trying to parent, it's really, really annoying. I mean, I see it every day in my office. One of the main fights that 35 and 40 and 50-year-olds are having is somebody being on their phone for work, on social media. That leads to affairs, emotional affairs. They're not playing with their kids because they're sitting on the couch playing on their phone. I mean, I've gone to these Bible studies. I've gone to these things where people my age who aren't even, sucked into it as much as y'all are, are so on their phone that they can't even connect and be engaged. So again, it's the illusion that if you get off of it, you're not going to have connection. But you don't have real connection anyway. You just have dopamine. Yeah. You just have addiction. You just have, like, what's it matter if you know somebody's pregnant? Honestly, like, if they're not telling you, right?
Yeah.
If you're not at their shower, if you're not sitting at lunch with them, how does it really impact their health? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, it does.
What
It's
are you
not
thinking,
actually
Drew?
connected.
It's an addiction to information.
Yeah, it's just information.
Sorry, went away from the microphone.
There you
Yeah,
go.
addiction to information is like we just feel like we have to know, we need to know, and we don't really need to know. What we need is connection, we were talking about earlier.
I mean, please
about,
argue. I mean, it's
No.
fine for you to argue with me and, like, say, no, that's crazy. We can't do it that way.
No, so trying to, if you don't mind, I'll turn this back a little bit on the church. It keeps on coming up.
Sure.
But for young adults, church oftentimes does not seem like a safe place, and it doesn't seem like a place where we can belong and find community because it doesn't seem authentic. Oftentimes, young adults grow up in the church, and we see people act a certain way on Sunday, and we see a completely different person at home, or we see our mom and dad, go to be good Christians and be admired in the church, and then we go home and they're yelling and arguing and getting divorces just like anybody else in the world. And so it just seems not authentic. And so when we strike out on our own and we do our own thing, church doesn't seem vital because I just don't want to play that game anymore.
Right.
I don't want to play that game, true, but also I think I think churches have a hard time connecting with young adults. And so if the only thing I'm doing from church is going and watching a sermon and watching a worship service, I can do that in my bed on Facebook. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have to go to the actual place anymore. I can just find it on Facebook. But I would argue with that is you're missing the actual connection of the church,? And so I think that, like,
well, that brings up the whole topic of should church be on social media and engaged in the way they are with something that's actually not giving them what they want, right? And that's going to be a big question after COVID, because I've heard of, Wes and I talked about this in episode 2, I think, but, is our churches going to continue to be heavily focused on, people being able to access church? We have all the access in the world.
Because now they say 10,000 people saw our service and 0 people walked through your doors and were, like, connected and actually equipping each other to do the gospel, And so
Or share the gospel.
Yeah. And so I think that young adults are craving that actual connection. And sometimes you don't get that in church when you just show up for corporate worship. Like that actual small group study is important.
Right.
So
yeah, it's almost like Jesus modeled that or something, like that you should have some 12 people around you and
do life
spend
with them.
most of your life
that are
together.
super important.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, that's one of the things that we want to be as Yala, is just an open door where people can plug in and find that community that they actually wanted in that church should have provided them from the get-go, but that might not have.
And church is made up of people, right? So
yeah, it's flawed.
Yes.
Because if people are, I mean, who said that a church is not some, place where perfect people are? It's actually a hospital where people go to get better.
Right.
So you're going to find people that are hurting, and that because they're hurting, they can hurt you. But it's a place where we all hopefully can hurt together and grow and heal.
Yeah, which brings me to the other part of young adults in the idea of consuming and going to church to get something out of it.
Yeah.
Right? People, so we're, the problem is you've got these generations of parents who are traumatized, who have passed it down. You don't know how to share. You've seen this inconsistency in your own house. You don't think church is a viable option for anything because when you show up, you don't get any answers. And then we've kind of moved into now we're just the consumer who are saying, well, I don't really like that music. Like, they don't sound like Hillsong. Like, it's like, it's all this stuff because you're as a young adult, you're used to being able to get what you want when you want it. And why would I listen to this person who I don't really like their voice when I can go over here and this is going to be really good and the mic's really good and the quality's really good and they throw glitter down from the, stage, and I mean, it's insane.
Yeah, but also, like, our pastor right now is walking through Romans, and what if I didn't want to walk through Romans? Like, what if I was like, I can go to this podcast and hear somebody talk about dating because that's what I really like. That's what I need to hear right now. Instead of like being open to what the Lord wants to tell me through Romans, I'm like, no, I want to hear this right now, and I can because we have all this access to information instead of So
that's good. Which again means you have to be able to self-regulate yourself. And do both and realize what the lane of Sunday morning is to go and be engaged in community. And some of that's on the church. We have to do a better job of making that an opportunity, right? I think Broadmoor does do a really good job of pushing small group and every member missionary and community. But the American church in general, all of us have fallen into this individualism, capitalism, like business-oriented culture. And I think young people are showing up desperate and in pain and anxious and depressed. And they're like, this is not meeting me where I'm at. Yep. And I can go back on social media and watch something else and get what I need exactly when I need it. And there's no room for the Holy Spirit. There's no room for, your selfishness and your immediate gratification to kind of be whittled out.
Yeah. And there are plenty of places where people can go to find community. If you want to go to a bar, you can go hang out with people at a bar. If you want to go join a team, like just go play softball or soccer. But what people actually really need is connection, not just being around people.
Yep.
So we need those communities that really connect us and help us be known and help and be encouraged and be challenged. And
a person can only do that if they know you. Right,
Yeah.
if you share your vulnerabilities and you share your flaws.
Yeah, but if you do that, they can reject you, and then we're going back into the
There we are. No, that's good. I mean, Becca, you're picking up on it. Like, that's the point. Our biggest fear is disconnection, is rejection. And for most young people, they've experienced that at home. 50% of them, parents, have separated, meaning their primary caregiver, who they're supposed to understand all of life through, their safety, their security, their attachment, their connection, one of them left. And then we're supposed to, from 7 and 8 and 9, go on in relationships thinking they're not going to fail and reject us.
Yeah.
But we don't recover from that. Right?
We never went to counseling for it.
Hey, I will say that for sure. Yeah, and not just counseling, but whatever the relationship looks like in which you connect with somebody and share your junk, and they walk you through that it's not your fault.
Yeah.
Right, that you're a victim, that you're going through trauma, that you're going through abuse, that this was not supposed to happen. And once you accept that happened and it was wrong, then you can move out of the victim seat and take personal responsibility for what you do moving forward. But I think there are a lot of young adults who think because their parents gave them money, they paid for their college, they did well, that they should be okay. I shouldn't have anxiety. I shouldn't be depressed. I shouldn't have these weird responses. I shouldn't be socially awkward. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And you know what's hard too is that, like, one of the things after you move from the victim stage and taking personal responsibility and stuff is that reflection stage where you look at how God used it in your own life. And when you can look back and say, like, wow, that sucked and that wasn't supposed to happen. But like Romans 8 said, the Lord used it for good. And I think as a generation, we're bad at sitting back and reflecting and saying, like, wow, COVID was hard, but this is what I learned through it. This is what I'm taking forward from it and things like that. But just being able to sit down in the presence of the Lord and reflect on where you were and where he brought you and how he used that in your life to bring you to, like, to equip you to do something different or something like that. But that, like, sitting still and reflecting on it is a hard place to be, but I think a necessary one if we want to move forward from it. So
yeah, I think that I think you have to love yourself to be able to do that, right? I think a lot of people, the core issue is that we don't want to sit with ourselves because we don't like ourselves very much.
So we numb with this Netflix or whatever,
or
we
people
minds,
liking everything that we do. Right. I mean, this is fact, right? I mean, I see people on social media. I see their little Facebook, circle icon, and then I see their banner photo, and the circle icon has so much editing to the picture that they look nothing like they look in their banner photo, right? And I'm not making fun of people, but the reality is that's a stark contrast to how insightful we are not. That we don't recognize that everyone else sees us for who we really are when we see them, and we're like, you don't look like that. Like, your face is narrow, your eyes are bigger.
But the other 800 friends on Facebook who never see us can believe that that's actually us.
And they like it.
Yeah.
Right? They comment and say, wow, you look really good in that picture. No one's like, oh my God. Well, I'm not going to say no one because there's some awful people in the world. But most people aren't like, we can totally tell you edited your picture like you're beautiful as you are.
Right.
No.
Like, what if that's how people commented on Facebook, right?
No one comments nice editing.
Right.
Yeah.
Or just like, hey, please don't edit your pictures. You're beautiful. Right?
Yeah.
Like, we see it and we're like, man, that's ridiculous, or that's sad, or, oh, man, I got to do that too. Like, my teeth aren't white enough. I need to make sure I get that edit and get them just perfect.
Or what app did you use to edit that?
Oh, for sure.
What filter is that?
Yeah,
So.
and we're so excited when the new filter comes out. Like, I see people post about it, this new filter comes out. And it's like, but that is the major problem that I think your generation deals with in a way that in history nobody's ever dealt with. And that's not your fault. Again, that's not to shame young adults. It's to speak to the problem so that we can do something about it.
Yeah, and I think just touching back on what Drew said on people being one way in church and then a different way at home, and then having that idea that you can't trust them or you can't trust the church. And that's how it is in social media too. Like, this is what you portray, but this is what I see whenever I have dinner with you. And so this, like, it feels like you can't trust anyone because everyone is different, or everyone has two faces or something like that. And so there's this, like, wait, who is actually real all the time? So.
Well, and you won't know if you don't spend real time with them. I mean, that's really the thing.
Yeah.
Right, is we really want consistency and structure, and we want to know what we're going to get from people. We want to feel people are authentic and we can trust them. But yeah, when you claim Christ and you preach and you talk and you do these things and you post Bible verses on social media, and then the next day you're bashing a politician, and you're talking hatefully and ugly, and then a week later you're posting a scripture that says love one another, and then the next week you're talking about
this doesn't.
Right.
What would Jesus have posted on social media?
Yeah, he wouldn't be on social media.
But yeah, what did Jesus say in John 13? It was, by this all will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. But we do a poor job a lot of our time in actually loving one another. And it's not just verbal. I mean, love is action.
Absolutely.
And love is time. And love is sacrifice.
But you can't love people if you don't know them.
And so that's our struggle as a generation is it sounds so hippie, but like learning how to love one another well, or accept love like we need to be able to. That's one of our key struggles, is how do we share in that love well, and how do we experience, where do we find that love?
And one of our friends, Jared, always says you need to know people's names and needs. And that is just a huge thing on learning how to love them, is that you have to, one, know their name, but you have to know what they need too.
Oh, yeah.
And if you're going to know what they need, you have to tell them what you need. And so it's this exchange of being vulnerable and learning about each other, but.
Yeah, I mean, letting people serve you is hard.
It's so hard.
I've been doing equine therapy for the last 6 months, and I really realized about 3 sessions in, there's this 1,200-pound animal in front of me, and I'm supposed to get him to do things, and I'm like, I have no clue what I'm doing, and I'm standing there, and I realized one session the therapist's like, "What are you feeling?" And I'm just kind of standing in this arena, and I'm like, I don't really feel like he wants to engage with me, and she's like, right, which is why he's not engaging with you. He picks up on how I feel, and I was feeling like, I don't really feel comfortable being vulnerable and asking this horse to engage, right? And I realized, I don't feel like I deserve it, or I don't feel like he wants to. It's easier for me just to be like, I don't need it, it's fine, I'll just stand here, right? Well, the horse picks that up and goes, well, okay, well, you're clearly not needing me, and you don't want to engage, so I'm just fine standing over here. But I'll connect with you if you really want it, right? And that's learning to make reasonable requests and ask for what we need. And I think from a generation of young adults who they met vulnerability with trauma, right? They were supposed to get affirmation and affection and attention, not need to ask for it and beg for it. And I think you guys grew up, and we grew up, needing it, not knowing how to get it. In generations before, but then the culmination of being able to access that with social media and with instant gratification made up for it, right? Quote unquote, made up for it. It has buffered us from completely falling apart because we can just keep maintaining, but we're getting to a point in society where we're not able, it only lasted 7 years. And now the suicide rate, the divorce rate, the abuse rate, the domestic violence rate, the addiction, the depression, the anxiety. I'm naming all these things not to harp on it, but it's all of them. Yeah. Right. And all of that has paralleled from 2010 to now, and we're all just kind of pretending like that's not the case. I tell people the suicide rate for teens has increased 76% in 10 years. Meaning, out of all the teenagers that we know, 76% more of them are killing themselves. And when I tell people that, they're shocked. And I'm like, that's the most shocking part, is that we're shocked by it.
Yeah.
How are we shocked by the fact that, these kids are actually taking their life? Who's missing this? Right? Speaking of pandemic, if suicide is double the size, the number of homicides, because it is, right? You can look it up. CDC website, more, double the people kill themselves than somebody else kills someone else.
Yeah, and with kids, I hate to just pound on social media, but parenting scares me in this day and age. Because if your child is miserable at school, if your child is being bullied at school, there's no way for them to disconnect from that when they go home. There used to be this time where you could, feel loved at home and kind of detox from what might have been going on at school, but there's no way to disconnect now. You're constantly connected to those sources of stress, and there's no wonder there's kids that are struggling to deal with that.
Oh, for sure.
You can't get a break from it.
Can't get a break.
No, you can't. I see it all the time. There was always bullying and people that give you, stuff in high school and mess with you and joke with you. But yeah, you get away from it. And now somebody can make an Instagram account of you, put all your terrible pictures they took of you up, and it's up.
Yeah.
And no one can do anything about it. And you're at home, but it's there. And you have your phone. So now you can engage in that comment and look at that comment and look at those pictures and you can see your friends go to the party without you, right? You can see somebody have a birthday party and they got invited and you didn't.
It's in your face all the time.
Every single day, all day long. Oh, these people hung out, or they went to this, or they went to that, or.
And why didn't they invite me? And then you're all in your head about it.
Right. When in reality, it's because not everybody can invite 400 people to everything they do. It's not personal. But because we're so desperate for connection, everything's a personal slight, which is where I think we've moved into this kind of victim mentality. We haven't healed from our trauma. We haven't recognized what the real enemy is. And so now, everything is just offensive, right? And I'm not saying that things in the culture aren't offensive. Like certainly racism, systemic racism, sexism, there's some major issues. But we almost go to the far, far left of, well, then I can be offended by anything. You know, and I think that's another thing that your generation's struggling with, or going to struggle with moving forward. I mean, probably a little younger, but definitely early 20s is this idea of personal responsibility versus like, you all owe me something because I'm hurt and offended, and how to manage that. Makes sense?
Oh yeah, I have no idea how to deal with it. But, you just go on social media and everybody is offended on about everything, and it's not just a left thing. It's not just a far left thing. I mean, talk about
not at all.
some of the most people who are triggered by anything are some of my friends on the right, and that any person who pops up with a different opinion is just offended them, and they have to lash out. And that's one of the dangers of the church. We touched on it very briefly earlier. Is how do we interact in politics? And I think the people who are best at it are the people who can share an opinion in love, and then love people with a different opinion. And unfortunately, that's becoming fewer and fewer and fewer people. Fewer and fewer voices are reasonable and are friends with people on the other side of an issue.
Yeah, because fewer and fewer people have the skill to differentiate between, you know, themselves and somebody else. That somebody having an opinion that's different than them doesn't actually take away from their worth and value. Yeah. Right? That our external things don't dictate internal worth and value. And if we claim to be Christians and we claim to be in Christ, then He says who we are. Right? And if somebody else says, no, that's not true, or I don't agree with this, or I'm for abortion, or I'm against abortion, or I'm for Trump, or I'm for Biden, it has nothing to do with you. Yeah. Right? And
or my value, or my, like, I'm the same person.
Yes. And the way you're going to get them to change that opinion is pray, because you can't change their opinion.
My Facebook posts aren't going to change their opinion?
No.
What? No.
No, they may give insight to somebody, which is why when you do it in love and you bring and you open up on Facebook, or you say, hey, this is my opinion lovingly, people will receive that way more than they're going to receive, you're wrong. Yeah. You're an idiot. Yep. This is ridiculous. This is stupid. Whatever negative connotation that it is. I mean, that's what I love about Jesus is, you know, we have these two camps that we live in, you know, the truth camp and the grace camp. You know, and I feel like it's kind of, that's how we are with Democrats and Republicans right now. If you're not a moderate, it's, if I'm on the right, I'm going to give you the hard truth. I don't care about your feelings. Like, this is the reality of what Jesus says even, right? Or this is the gospel, or God is, you know, sovereign and this is what He's going to do. Or the left is, well, just love people, be open to whatever anybody wants, like let people live their life, don't judge, don't criticize, don't say something's unhealthy, or maybe this comes from trauma, or maybe this is a problem. That's judgmental and critical, and that's hate. Right. When in reality, Jesus did both all the time. You know, He was super kind, super graceful, but He also spoke the truth. He also said, this is hard, this is not what you should be doing, go and sin no more. But He did it in a way where He was engaged relationally, right? Which is, in my opinion, no, I don't think your Facebook post is going to matter if you're not in a relationship with somebody. It will matter to somebody who you're in a relationship with. Like, if you've had coffee with them 5 times and then you post something, they may be like, wow, that was really insightful and helpful. That was about this because we talked about it. But someone who doesn't know you.
But I would argue, too, that even posting it on Facebook, if I were to call up my friend and say, hey, I don't understand why you did that, or, like, can you explain why you posted that? Because this is what I think is way more effective than posting on their Facebook wall. You know what I mean? And so it's like, I read this one thing that was like, your Facebook post never changed anybody else's opinion. And it's like, that's true. So, like, let's just have conversations about it instead of posting behind this wall of, like, just my profile picture, you know?
Yeah, which is it's the only alternative though. Like, it's that cognition that this is the only way. Like, if I don't ever post on Facebook, what else do I have? And that's really why I'm trying to talk about, you know, I know we're harping on social media, but figuring out how young adults, especially early young adults, but even middle, you know, to upper age young adults, can function without it, so that there can be an entire system change. Because, I mean, one of the studies that's coming out is like, it's not social media in and of itself that's bad. Like, social media would be great if it wasn't so manipulative, right? As Facebook is now and Instagram is now and Twitter and all these things, like it's so awful. But we just continue to use it. I mean, so many parents have their teenagers on TikTok, and it's just basically porn and self-harm videos. I mean, yeah, there's some silly stuff, but the likelihood of you coming across something you can't unsee is very, very high. Mm-hmm. And yet they're just, signing up left and right. And then I see people, parents, do a TikTok video with their kid because it's cute or it's fun and they're not doing anything inappropriate. But again, it's what are we accepting and allowing and supporting when we do that? Because other people don't know that that's the only time you've ever done it, or that you monitor your kid's device, or that they don't have it on their phone. And does that make sense?
There's a potential for great harm.
Yes.
It makes a lot of sense. And too, I don't think we can figure out how to do social media well as young adults until we're not addicted to it. And so this break for 90 days or this break for 6 months is important, because then you can live without it. And so you can then monitor yourself and say, I'm going to only do social media for an hour every 3 days or something like that, so that I'm still on it and I'm still in that world with other people, but I'm also not only in that world. I have a life, I have real connection with real people outside of that. But I don't think we can figure out how to do it well until we stop for a time and then bring it back in. And maybe I'm wrong.
No, I think you're 100% right, because we're talking about the basic building blocks of life. I mean, Maslow's hierarchy of need. The top point of the hierarchy is self-actualization, where you can fully function, be in control, be aware of yourself, have insight, right? Scripture would call this wisdom literature, being able to know yourself, know God, know your purpose, listen to the Holy Spirit. But if your basic needs aren't met, which are food, sex, water, drugs, connection, right? These things that, not drugs, food, water, sex, connection, relationships, right? But in that second tier of relationships, you don't really have relationships. You have social media, right? You have dopamine. That's what I meant by drugs. You have this false sense of connection. Then you're not going to get to self-actualization. So how are you going to manage something that is, not, you can't control it. You can't outthink it when you're not at your A game. So yeah, I think you have to step down and get your brain realigned and figure out who you are and figure out who your real friends are, how you're going to do social media, and then agree together. This is the problem with parents right now. I mean, I'm saying hey, if you have my kids, okay? So you're saying, I don't know what to do. This is my goal for people. If you're a young adult and you're a new parent, right? You're 30, you're 28, you got a couple kids. You need to realize that, number one, you're addicted to social media, and so you need to figure out how to get off of it and deal with it. And then you need to know how to have real community. Because in my friend group, if I go over to someone's house and they have Alexa in their kid's bedroom, I unplug it. Right? I say, hey, can we take this out of your office or your room right now? Or can they not have this? Because I don't want my kid talking to the internet alone in the room. And when my kids are 8 and 9, I'm going to already be having conversations saying, hey, when do you guys plan on giving your kids phones? Because let's all agree that we're not going to do that. So that when we hang out and we cook out and we have friends and we do D-group, my kid's not saying, well, I'm the only one who doesn't have it. Does that make sense? We've all kind of signed this contract together socially where we've just let everybody do whatever without talking to each other about how we're going to do it together. Does that make sense?
And then the comparison comes in where it's well, I need to be a better parent than that parent, so my kid's going to get the better phone, not that,
Yeah,
and
well,
so
that just makes it 1,000 times worse, yes.
Yeah.
But if we can have communities where we go back to the basics of community and we say, hey, before we get into this situation, and you couldn't do that before. Again, the problem is that this tech thing hit and the phone hit and we didn't know any of this. What I'm talking about is what do we do for the next generation, right? What are these young adults, you guys who are going to become parents, who are going to become caregivers, how do you transition your kids into a safer, more thought out environment to where, because it's not going to be the same if you do it differently. Does that make sense? I think my fear even with a 6 and 3-year-old is, oh my gosh, this world's going to hell in a handbasket. What do I do? And then I keep having to say, well, I prepare them. I train them. I engage with my friends and say, hey, look, we're not doing this. If you got Wi-Fi at your house, my 12-year-old's not coming over if he can get on it. Right? So I need you to block your Wi-Fi. But that means you have to have some good friends You have to have trust. You have to have hard conversations. You have to explain. I mean, my wife was laughing the other day because she's, every new friend we hang out with, she's always like, have you read these 2 books? Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, and God Made All of Me. Are you talking to your kid about, safe touch and about showing their private parts? Do they know what those, because our kid's going to go over there. And I want my kid around kids who are safe, who understand the language, who know not to touch, so that I can stand in the kitchen and talk to these other kids with my kid in the room, and I can trust that they're safe.
Yeah.
And because of overexposure and because of technology and because of what everybody's watching on Netflix and on YouTube and on everything else, you don't know. But if I would rather risk losing friends and not hanging out than going and engaging in something where a simple conversation around which book are you reading, or hey, could you read this the next couple of weeks, could save all of us a lot of heartache and a lot of headache. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's, again, always come back to community. If we are engaged in healthy communities, we can get through this together. But if we're isolated, we really have no chance. So it's just vital to plug in and to find people who are similarly minded to you and who want the same things and are willing to walk with you through it. So, yeah, I mean, this social media detox, it's intimidating for me. But yeah, I might have to try that with my D group. Try to all disengage for a period of time. It'd be fun.
But I think too, if you're looking at it from a church perspective, which we are today, is that like biblical community, the whole purpose is to glorify the Lord in everything you do. And so once you detox from social media, it's like, okay, how do I use this to glorify the Lord? Because that's my only purpose here now. And so like figuring that out. But you, like Drew said, you can't figure that out in isolation. It's not just going to be you and God talking about how you can use your social media, but it's going to come from community with other people. And one of my favorite things that you said from this past Monday night is that God made Eve before the fall for Adam. Like that just, I had not thought about that either. And I've read Genesis a lot, but it's like we were created for community even before sin ever entered the picture.
Yes.
And so it's one of these things where it's an innate part of who we are and what we desire. God himself has community with himself, and so we were created to have community with other people. And when you're isolated from that, a core part of who you are is not being fed.
Right, and your connection with God is disconnected. Because he's not just saying it's enough for you to be in a closet praying to me in a monastery somewhere. Like I heard somebody say, they traveled, they went to this monastery because they were freaking out. They had anxiety, had social anxiety, had all these problems. They were like, I got to get out of here. And he said, I traveled 1,000 miles and my mind didn't move. Right? My mind came with me. I'm in this monastery, still anxious and depressed and irritated. It's not getting outside of these things. Now, sometimes a break's great, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is that you can move around, you can travel, you can go do all these things. But if you don't love yourself, if you don't feel worthy of love, if you don't feel, accepted, then that just comes with you. And whoever you're engaging with in those moments are the same. And so, one thing, that I see a lot in my office, and I said this Monday too, is just that idea that, God is our parents, right? We grow up as young adults thinking that the God of the Christian God is our parent, right? They're authoritarian. They dictate everything we do. They're mad at us and they punish us, and, because that's the only model we've had, little subtle things like, hey, Dad, I built this block castle for you, and don't you love me now? And it's like, no, I love you because you're my son. Right. I love you because I created you. You can't do anything for me to love you, right? If my oldest came up and said that, I'd be like, get out of here, kid. Like, I love you because you're mine. And God feels that same way about us, but we've forgotten that because we haven't seen that modeled in our own homes a lot, and they didn't see it modeled. Again, it's not the parent blame game. It's just where we're at, is that these generational products of sin and brokenness and dysfunction in the family have creeped its head on young adults right now in 2020 in a way that is just very unique to y'all. And you're dealing with a lot of problems that are new, that society has never dealt with, on top of the typical trauma and the typical family system and the typical shame at such a high rate. The busyness, the rush, the constant gratification, the constant need for affirmation and attention and affection, it's just all the time, and you never get a break from it. And until we slow our brains down and detox from some of this stuff and figure out how to have community a different way, we're not going to be able to re-engage with it and know what we're actually doing. and know that we're doing this for me and my heart, not just kind of running the wheel of life.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So true.
So we got a few more minutes. I want to talk a little bit about dating in 2020. I think one of the things that you guys are both, I know you both have some significant others. And the reality is that one of the things that, even at 37, I think it was a little bit because of social media and issues. Again, we're talking about social media, but this is your world, right? But like I went and picked girls up at their house in my car and met their parents. Like, I don't think that's a thing that most young adults are doing these days. Is that true?
I don't know. I think they should.
No, we're not talking about what they should. We're talking about what's happening.
Yeah, whether they do. Yeah, no. Everybody's meeting one-on-one. That's how you. You go on Hinge or you go on Bumble.
I was about to say, you know what changed the dating game?
Oh God, I don't know what those things are. So tell me.
Dating apps.
Oh, for sure.
I wrote this down but like with dating apps, you are given the idea that there's this endless pool of people that you can date. Because when you swipe right, there's somebody new right there, and so you get so picky and so like, oh, there's all these people that could be possible, and there's not. Like, it's this false sense of like everyone's out there, and it's not true.
Now,
tell me about what are those apps?
So they're apps.
I know Tinder and like Grindr and
right. There's apps that connect people. There's apps that are targeted towards physical connection, kind of like Tinder, Grindr, what you're talking about, and then but there are ones that are kind of more focused on building, like forming dating relationships.
Christian Mingle or...
you got Christian Mingle, you got...
Farmers Only is one of them.
So yeah, those are for making the connection. But I really don't feel like after you make the connection, the game has changed. You still need to go meet that person face to face. You still got to go grab coffee, get lunch together. You still got to meet that person's family, engage with what that person loves to do. Because if that person's not going to be able to plug in with you at what you love to do, it's not going to work out. So, so I think the way that we connect is different, but dating hasn't changed that much, or shouldn't. Change that.
You said shouldn't, but it definitely has.
I was about to say, I agree that it shouldn't, and I know you're 30, so that does put you on the farther end. Like, you still kind of fall into a category where you still have some of that old way of thinking about it. I think more so than even 5 years later. Where that's the problem again with this young adult spread, is that between you two, and then between me, are lifetimes of difference. And we just don't realize how subtle that is, that in 5 years things can just turn so quickly, like apps and products and technology and the way we do it. So let's let the young one, the youngest one.
Oh, wow.
And even in that, again, like, you're 25, like, you're a grown adult working in a career, right? And that's another part of like young. It's such a wide gap that, like, I feel 25, but like I realize sometimes when I hang out with 25-year-olds that I'm 30, I'm almost 40. Like. So speak to, you said that's how it should be, but it's not. So what do you see kind of being the train wreck of dating life, especially from a female perspective? But that's way worse.
And so I'm going to talk not from necessarily personal experience. So I'm not trying to...
Yeah, your boyfriend's great.
Yeah, he's awesome. So we're just going to say that this is not about him. But I have a lot of friends who are on dating apps and things like that. And one of the things I see that's just so... I don't know, it's so interesting is that girls still want to be pursued, and girls still want to fill that role of like, you're taking care of me, you're the one leading this relationship and things like that. And like, I can't tell you how many of my friends are like, okay, I'm going to meet this guy. We met on Hinge, and so then they turn their location on so I know where they are and they're not going to get kidnapped and things like these are not things we thought about 5 years ago, you know? But okay, you're sharing your location with me. I'm calling you in 7 minutes to make sure he's there, and like, you know, things like that. And you're not scared and need to walk out, you know? And then they're like, have this dinner, and it's this...
Never even thought of this. I never even thought of that. Wow.
Yeah.
Keep going.
And then you have dinner and you have the same conversation. Who are you? What do you do? What do you like to do in your free time? Like, da 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 da. And then you get the check and he doesn't pay. And then you walk out and he still wants to go on another date. And they're like, no, like, this was not fun for me. You know, you didn't pay for my meal and things like that. And so it's just this, like,
which is that's a touchy subject in the culture of 2020. Like,
it is.
This idea that men should pay for your meal or shouldn't. You know, I'm sure there'll be some good comments on the feed for this.
Oh yeah.
But the reality is like, you're right though. Like, there is something. That's what I mean. Like, we don't know how to do it, right? I'm not. And I know, Becca, you're not saying that's how it should be. You're saying that there are these things in our culture that have always been, and we don't know how. Like, they've changed subtly, but then now they've changed even more drastically with the way that things go with technology and anonymous dating, expectations.
And then you have all these dating shows on Netflix and stuff like that, and you're like, what? This is not real. But I think one of the biggest things is that we don't have any clear expectations for what we want. Like,
yeah, it's like, take care of me and pay for my dinner, but don't disrespect me and
But like, also, I'm a woman and I can do whatever I want.
Yes.
And feminism, and like, you can go into all of these different things, but it's like, there's no clear expectation. And I think one of the biggest things dating in 2022 as a young adult is some people are looking for marriage and looking for that, like, forever, and some people aren't. They're like, I just want to have fun right now and, like, just have you come to weddings with me, but I'm not ready to talk about forever, or I'm not ready for that, like, type of commitment in my life. Like, and so you have...
But then you can't see somebody, like, so then can you see other people?
Yeah.
Like, can you go on other wedding dates? Like, yeah.
Exactly. And so you have this dating that's, like, not always ending in marriage, or you have this, like, all these people that want to do the same thing of dating, but they don't want it for the same reasons and stuff like that. And so you're like, so are we seeing other people, or is this just me and you now? Like, where are we in this? Where are we on the spectrum? Like, is this actually going somewhere, or is this just me and you having fun because you're craving connection since we've been in COVID, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's always been the when do you call somebody after a date, you know, conversation. Like, I heard somebody last week, they're like, no, you definitely don't do that. Like, you have to give it. Let them work for it. Let them stir in it. And it's like, wow. You know, like, that's always been super unhealthy in my opinion. Like,
it's so
be
unhealthy.
authentic, you know, like, be congruent. Like, ask for what you need, you know, say what you want, set expectations. But again, that's always been a problem. But now it's a problem for a culture who everything is through text. We talked, I don't know if I said this Monday, but, you know, you remember like 5 years ago when we would say something like, you know, now be careful, don't text that way, because you would never say that in person. Right? Or if you're sending an email for work, you're like, well, be careful how you send it. Well, wait until you can see them in person, because it's going to come off wrong. How many arguments and fights and, you know, dramas have gone down because somebody misread a text message, right? And that was a conversation we'd have. And so people would realize, like, keyboard warriors say stuff behind the screen they'd never say to somebody's face and all that. But then the debates happened this last week, and it's almost like Twitter was live played on television. Like, now we've moved from people saying you would never talk like that in public to, no, that is how we communicate. We do say very provocative, very direct, very Twitter, tweet, text-esque conversations with some girl you just met. Like, if you can swipe left and right, you know, how do you go on a date and see him and go, oh, I don't like it, he's got glasses on, I'm done.
Exactly. And so you get so picky because you feel like you can build exactly what you want and it's out there somewhere. And that's just not true. Like, we're human. I'm not going to be a perfect fit for anybody. You know what I mean?
It's consumerism.
It's consumerism.
You know, one of the analogies that I love is this idea. It's this rabbi, and he's walking down the street, and he sees this guy, and he's got this fish, and he's eating the fish, and he says, oh, I see you caught the fish, you know? And he said, yeah, I love fish. He says, oh, you love fish. So you saw the fish, you got the fish, and you ate the fish because you love it. And so much of American culture and culture in general is fish love. It's, I see something that'll do something for me that I like, that'll benefit me, and so I love it. You know, it's the Jerry Maguire, you complete me. It's the, you know, it's,
I hate that line.
Yeah, but the reality is that it comes from deficits.
Yeah.
Right? It comes from family system issues where you don't feel enough, where you saw your mom and dad not together, where you got, you know, traumatized by a man or a woman or both. And now you're saying, if I finally can find this other person, I can find my peace and my safety and my security. They can make me feel loved. They can love me for who I am. They can see me intimately, right? That hopefully is the goal.
Mm-hmm.
But if that's the goal, then that has to always be part of the plan. And what I see is that people want that. They want connection. They want to be known. They want to be valued, but they want to skip all the steps that it takes
to get there. They want to arrive,
and
which is instant gratification.
Yes.
Yeah,
Man, tying it together.
On dating, I feel like one of the difficulties we do have is because we are so focused on a curated image of ourselves and projecting this image that is very hard to be known in the most intimate of relationships, marriage. So as we're preparing and we're dating someone, seeing if that could be a spouse, it's very hard when we're still obsessed with making sure they see the image that we want them to see.
Mm-hmm.
So it goes back to what we've been discussing like this whole time is how is this social media presence, how is this curated image of ourselves that we project, how is that affecting us? Well, it's affecting the way that we can connect in community, but it's also affecting the way that we connect and form the most intimate of relationships. And I do think that's an obstacle young adults are going to have to face is how can we be vulnerable and authentic in the closest of relationships when we've never learned how to do that in the first place.
Yeah.
So
I think the answer for me for a lot of it is just education and conversation.
Yeah.
Is being real, is having people in your life who tell you what it's like to be married.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Like what it's really like.
Yeah,
not
like
it's this perfect.
Yeah, like that people's breath
unicorns and
stink.
rainbows.
Yeah.
You know, and that, I saw this, we were watching this show the other day, and it's like this couple, they had sex, and then the girl like sneaks into the bedroom and like does all her makeup and stuff, and then like jumps back in the bed, and she's like laying there like she always looked like that the whole night,
Yeah.
And it's like, that's what people see and expect, and it's like, no, like your breath stinks, somebody's got to take a shower, like somebody's full, like you engage in these intimate ways, but it's not the movies, right? It's not this, this euphoric high that everything is given to us. It's real life. Parenting is real life. There's real struggles. There's realities. You don't always look good. Everybody has a double chin when you take a picture from this way. But that's a thing that we trick ourselves to think. We're like, I'm going to get this perfect angle so my jawline's good and so everything's great. And then you have to meet the person and go to lunch with them and get to know them, and you're
Which
like,
one are you?
yeah, you don't even look like the person that's in the picture. And so you're right. We're showing false selves to each other and then expecting to be able to be vulnerable and be intimate and be connected. And yes, the biggest fear is rejection. The biggest fear is showing up and somebody being like, you're not enough.
Yeah.
Which is why it's so important for us to know ourselves, for us to know that God loves us, for us to have good friends and trustworthy people in our lives who are pouring into us with the truth, so that when we meet a person who doesn't see us for who we are, we know that really quickly and we move on. We're able to go,
Yeah.
You know what? I love myself. I like how I am. I like that I'm this way. I like that I'm nerdy and like this stuff. These are the things that I enjoy. And I'm not going to hide them, because the people in my life who I have dinner with, who I spend time with, who I have coffee with, who I keep their kids, they know me, they see me, they know my faults. So if this man or this woman doesn't,
It's not a reflection on me.
no.
Yeah.
And that's hard.
Oh, it's really hard.
That is a hard place to be. It's a hard place to get to.
But it's impossible alone.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible without those people that you come back from that date and you go, man, I just really, I didn't feel good today. I didn't say the right thing. And they're like, no, we love you because you're funny and you're hilarious. And this is what we like about you. And yeah, you're a little weird about that, but that's why,
Yeah.
And then you find those, and then you want to bring that person into that community. Because that's the other thing about it that I want people to understand is you go to a wedding, and so many times you forget that all the people that are in that wedding are your community, that they're all involved. They should be involved in that process. That it's not just about you and your special day and your, $10,000 cake. It's about community and connection and support, because they're going to be with you in your marriage, not just in your wedding.
And that is just so true all around, is that like whenever you are dating, like, yes, you start off on these dates with just you and this one person, but the reality is you don't live your life alone. And so that person's going to have to fit into your friend group, your church group, your family. Like, you don't just get married and move on an island by yourself. Like,
Nope.
you still have to deal with the people in your life. And so if they don't like that person, like, huge rift, you know? And so And I feel like dating in 2020 it's harder to bring them into those communities and things like that. Just, it's easier to be like, let's just go get dinner by ourselves instead of like,
For sure.
hey, these are some people who are very important to me. Will you come to dinner with me and them and let's all hang out, you know? But
yeah. And I think to circle back to COVID, I mean, I think that's another reason why people don't realize how bad isolation and the masks and all these things are on the mental health aspect. And I'm not saying what we should or shouldn't do about that, but there's no doubt that it's causing major like we already have a hard time with all this stuff as it is, as we've kind of unraveled here. But then you add in like, oh, you should be meeting with families and connection, but like now you can't, because if you go over to this person's house and meet their parents, their grandparent, you know, like it's a mess.
It's a mess.
So I think, you know, the message that I want for young adults is that you're not uniquely broken, that you have some very special first time in history things that you're dealing with, but that it's not unknown. There's not answers to how to solve those problems. It's just that the way that it's going, you can't get to the root causes. You can't do life the way that you do without having a life that you have experienced in real community and real connection.
Yeah.
You can be on social media. You can engage in TikTok videos. You can do all those kind of things. But what you can't do is have grown up developmentally with those forever and be able to do them well. Mm-hmm. So there has to be a time period in your life where you get control over your neurology and your impulses, and not only you, but your community involved with you, even if it's 4 friends, you know, and then y'all together hold each other accountable. Because again, in order to hold somebody accountable, you have to know them and they have to know themselves. And so you can say, hey, I know we're all getting back on social media now. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to check in. We're going to do this. We're going to make sure we're not falling back into those same patterns. And, you know, because we all know it. We all know when we click on an Instagram story and we're like, oh, I wish that was me. Or I should look like that. Or I should do that. Mm-hmm. Or, man, maybe they went on vacation. Like, I wish I was on vacation. Like,
like, I want to be in Turks and Caicos, too.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I want to be on the beach in Cancun doing a podcast.
Let's do it there next time.
Yeah, exactly.
Location change.
Maybe one day. You know?
But no, you're right. It's normal. But that's why things like y'all exist. That's why we try to build healthy churches.
Absolutely.
That's why we have this podcast. That's why we have counselors. There is hope out there.
Absolutely.
There is ways to find peace and healing. It's not found in isolation.
Nope.
So let's not sit there.
It's good.
And it's not, I mean, I guess for me, the biggest thing is like, know your worth in Christ. Like, know who he is, know who he created you to be, know who he's calling you to be. Because like you said, until you love yourself and realize how valuable you are as a person and to him, and what you bring to relationships and things like that, you're never going to value yourself enough to find good community.
Right, for sure. And that's because of who God says you are, not because of who you are.
Exactly.
Right? It's that God is so good and so loving and so rich in the way that he loves us that we don't have to stand in shame, that we can stand in who he says we are. Because I think that is the other slippery slope, is as young adults thinking that the story is about us. You know, we're adopted, we're David in the stories. You know, we're slaying our giants. Yeah. We're the Good Samaritan. When in reality, like, we're the Israelites. We're in the ditch. Like, Jesus is the reason we have worth and value. And the
new creation that he makes us.
Yes.
You know.
And then we can go out and stand in that, boast in our weaknesses, realize we're a mess, realize we're awkward, realize we're overweight, realize we're ugly, realize whatever it is that the situation is. Yeah. But we still have intrinsic worth and value that is not determined by those things.
Yeah. And neither death nor life nor powers nor social media nor anything can separate you from that.
That's right. Good stuff.
Romans 8.
Well, I appreciate you guys coming on and talking and hanging out with us.
No, this was fun.
This was fun.
I think we covered some good topics.
Yeah.
If you're looking for Yala, it's on Monday nights. Young Adults, Louisiana, Broward Baptist. They start about 7 o'clock, hang out about 6:30. You can find them on social media. But make sure you detox before you get there.
Gotta find a better way to connect with people.
Yeah, maybe we'll send carrier pigeons and postcards.
Absolutely. Carrier pigeons are the way to go. You just got to clean up all the poop.
Thank you, Clint. Thank you for
that.
that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.